Quick heads up, this story gets graphic and disturbing. Viewer discretion advised.
This is a story that goes beyond any understanding of human cruelty. And today we're breaking down how 9-year-old Jared Tutko, a boy with special needs, lived for years in an invisible trap inside his own home. And even though he was known to social services literally from the day he was born, it didn't save him. But when police finally opened that one door on the 3rd floor, what they saw in there, experienced investigators would later call the most horrific sight of their careers. And definitely watch this video to the end, because that's where we'll try to understand how so many people and institutions who were supposed to protect Jared could have failed so tragically. Hey everyone, let us know what city you're from. What time is it where you are? And what's the weather like? And let us know, do you have any pets at home?
Jared Nicholas Tutko Jr. was born on October 5, 2004 at Shore Memorial Hospital in Summers Point, New Jersey. His parents were Kimberly Tutko and Jared Tutko Sr., and these are names we are going to have to remember. Now Jared Jr. wasn't the only kid in the family. He lived with 5 brothers and sisters, some of whom will only be mentioned by their initials in the story, which is usually done to protect minors, according to the mother, Kimberly. Jared Jr. allegedly had serious mental disabilities, and taking care of him was supposedly incredibly difficult. Sounds like a preemptive excuse, doesn't it? The behavior was destructive to say the least, but in August 2005, less than a year after he was born, they found a medical explanation for the chaos. Jared Jr. was officially diagnosed with Fragile X syndrome, which is a very real genetic condition known to cause serious developmental delays. And here's where we get to the really interesting part, the parents' background. See, both Kimberly and Jared Sr. were already on the radar of social services for a while, even before Jared Jr. was born for Kimberly. This whole questionable history started way back in 1993. That's when a case was opened against her with the Schuylkill County Children and Youth Services and the first report. And shortly after that, she apparently decided not to fight it and just voluntarily gave up her parental rights to her other kids from that same relationship. So after the relationship with the first father ended, or, let's be real, after they took her kids away, Kimberly married Jared Sr. They were still living in Pennsylvania, and in this marriage, she had 2 more children. A daughter named BT, born August 31st, 2000, and a son named Auntie, born September 15th, 2001. But the problems didn't go away, they just started a new cycle. The Schuylkill County Department of Social Welfare once again expressed concern, this time about unstable housing. It seems the family was constantly moving from place to place, and the kids, as often happens in these situations, weren't getting the medical care they needed. But Kimberly, instead of fixing the problems, she chose a different tactic, the tactic of attack. It was noted that on April 24th, 2002, she actually called the Department of Social Welfare in another county, Dauphin County, and started complaining that the Schuylkill County Department was, you see, handling her family's case. So the message wasn't, help us, it was back off. Things were getting more and more serious. On October 15th, 2002, a court hearing was scheduled, and its purpose was very specific: to remove BT and Auntie from their parents' custody. But this hearing never actually happened. Why? Well, because Kimberly and Jared Sr. just packed their bags and moved out of Pennsylvania before the court date. They fled, and as a result, Schuylkill County just closed the case. I mean, they can't exactly chase them across the country. It's interesting, Jared Sr. later let it slip. He told a Dauphin County social worker that they moved to New Jersey in 2002 because their own lawyer had warned them that Schuylkill County was definitely going to take their children. This wasn't panic. It was a conscious, calculated escape from the consequences. But Pennsylvania tried to do the right thing after the family moved. Back on October 11th, Schuylkill County contacted their colleagues in New Jersey, the Division of Youth and Family Services, known as DYFS. They told them about the open case and the scheduled court hearing that the Tutkos had skipped. They also clearly stated, and this is important, that Kimberly and Jared Sr. were completely uncooperative with the safety plan and refused to give permission to check their records. And what did New Jersey do? At the time, Jared Sr., Kimberly, and their kids were living in some hotel. The police showed up, checked in, took a look. And in their opinion, The children were safe just because they were alive. So this specific referral, this massive red flag from Pennsylvania, was closed. But as we all know, this was just the beginning. Over time, New Jersey's DYFS got plenty of other reports about poor parenting and the parents' total failure to follow medical advice.
And the assembly line for producing children apparently didn't stop. Soon, on August 11th, 2003, Kimberly and Jared Sr. had another daughter, known as ART. And as you might have guessed, the problem started almost immediately. What's more, her father, Jared Sr., apparently decided he was smarter than the people in white coats and reduced the child's medication dose himself. And this was despite the pediatrician explicitly forbidding him from doing it. The system, despite everything, decided to give them yet another chance. So let's just summarize this track record after all of these incidents. With all the previous children, neither of Jared Jr.'s parents had a stable life, nor obviously any desire to have one at the time the boy was born. So the hospital was asked, or rather DYFS asked them, to delay his release to his parents. It was just such an obvious and direct risk. And after his discharge from the hospital, he was transferred to foster care. But how long was he there? He was there from October 12th to the 18th, 2004, 6 days, 6 days of relative calm and safety. In 2005, Kimberly and Jared Sr. moved again, this time from New Jersey to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Running from problems again, neighbors in the new area said they almost never saw the mother, Kimberly, near the house. She was like a ghost, but they definitely saw the father. Jared Jr., the same one diagnosed with Fragile X syndrome, was returned to live with these parents by July 3rd. But even before that, on June 21st, DYFS had managed to open another case on him. A nurse who was helping the family at home raised the alarm. At this critical moment, the doctor personally called the family and said that Jared Jr. needed to go to the hospital immediately. This was a direct order from a medical professional. And what did Jared Sr. say back? He said they didn't have a car. The classic, painfully familiar excuse. The doctor didn't back down and told him to call an ambulance immediately, but the father, he just refused and hung up the phone. He refused to save his child. Luckily, someone else acted. Jared Jr. was hospitalized at Shore Memorial that same day, July 3rd, but only thanks to the direct intervention of DYFS. Social services essentially had to rip him from the home. At the time of his admission, he weighed 13 pounds, 7 ounces. Now look closely. At his discharge on July 11th, just 8 days later, he had gained over a pound and weighed 14 pounds, 11 ounces. What does that mean? It means that in the hospital, they just started feeding him normally, and he immediately started gaining weight. The proof was as obvious as it could possibly be. After being discharged, he was, of course, placed back in custody, where he stayed until April 6, 2006. But eventually, he was returned to his parents. And shortly after this triumphant return to the family, another referral was made on July 7th. DYFS in New Jersey again contacted their colleagues, this time in Dauphin County, Pennsylvania. They were concerned that the family, having moved, wasn't even getting the minimal support and supervision they had in New Jersey. And what did Dauphin County do? They decided not to investigate the report. They just brushed it off, claiming that they, you see, didn't have enough information about the family's residents. Seriously. A family that was on the radar of all services in 2 states just got lost.
So 2 years of relative silence went by. The next time the Tutko family came to an agency's attention was January 9th, 2008. This time, the trigger was the staff at Steele Elementary School. They filed a report about BT, the oldest daughter, who was 7 years old at the time. Jared Sr. would call weekly and gave the impression of being an absolutely terrifying, oppressive person. And this wasn't just one kid's imagination. The case, it seems, was just swept under the rug, and the red flags just kept piling up like no one was even noticing them. Another referral came in on February 3rd, 2010, and guess from where? The same Steele Elementary School. In the court documents, by the way, this child is mentioned with the initials DT, but I, like many researchers of this case, believe this is just a typo in the documents, and it's actually about BT, one of Jared Jr.'s older sisters. Why do we think that? It's simple logic based on the facts. We know that after Jared Jr. was born, his parents had 2 more daughters, one in 2008 and another in 2011. At the time of this referral in 2010, only the older sister, BT, could be identified as the one being discussed at the elementary school. She was the only sister who was even physically enrolled in school at the time. The other two children were never mentioned by their initials in court documents, and one of them, the one born in 2011, hadn't even been born yet when this report came in. And yes, I completely understand that all these initials, BT, ANT, ART, are incredibly confusing. It's just some alphabet soup. But we are deliberately not going to use the full names of these surviving children. All other official sources have also hidden their names. And I believe this is the absolutely correct and ethical position. In the end, the goal should be to protect the identities of these children who have already been through hell. I know there are plenty of cases where the media relishes using the names of all the surviving children, or where one of the kids suddenly ends up in the spotlight. But here, thankfully, that didn't happen, and I'm glad the media did the right thing and didn't name these kids nonetheless. Since we're dealing with a ton of these abbreviated names, we will be showing a special graphic a few times during the video, A Who's Who, so you can better follow this tangled timeline. And then on February 18th, the social worker made, and this is the key word, a scheduled visit to the family's home on Green Street in Harrisburg. Scheduled meaning the family knew they were coming and had time to prepare for the performance. Kimberly also had an explanation for BT's fever, claiming BT felt better the next morning. She checked her temperature at home. It was normal, so she sent her to school. Sounds like a standard rehearsed excuse.
But here's the most important part. Before closing the investigation, the social worker wrote in her report that she still needed to personally observe Jared Jr. And what did Kimberly say? She calmly said he was in a friend's house. Seriously, a child with Fragile X syndrome, with severe intellectual disabilities, with the destructive behaviors the mother herself had described. At a friend's house. It sounds like absolute nonsense, like the first thing that came to her mind, and the scariest part. There are no records to confirm if the social worker checked every room in the house that day. It seems she just took her word for it. But the story continues. The next day, February 19th, another social worker returned to the house, and this time, voila. They were shown Jared Jr. According to the report, he looked clean and had no visible problems. The report noted he looked a little mentally slow, which, matched his diagnosis. But they felt no concerns. So in 24 hours, after the child was at a friend's, he was cleaned up and shown to an inspector. And based on this, the agency closed the investigation. Less than a year goes by. On December 9th, 2010, Dauphin County CYS gets another report about the same girl, BT. The person who wrote this report said that BT, for the last year or more, meaning this wasn't a one-time thing, nothing else was documented about this report. And the question remains, did that social worker even bother to look at any of the previous dozen referrals? Was he even remotely aware of this family's entire history with child services in New Jersey or Schuylkill County? You get the strong feeling that with every new referral, they treated it like they were seeing this family for the very first time. The silence lasted for 3 years, and then on October 23, 2013, a new, very alarming report came in through the Pennsylvania Child Protection Services. On October 24th, the very next day, she visited the home and told the parents she needed to see all the children. And this is where a very strange scene begins. In response to this demand, Jared Sr. silently went up to the 3rd floor. He was gone for about 15 minutes, then he came back down, but carrying Jared Jr. only to the 2nd floor. On October 31st, the social worker met with ANT at his school. The report seems to have some weird typo or confusion with the initials, but from the context, it's clear it's about the brother, ANT. He was 12 years old at the time and in a safe environment, away from his father. The boy told the truth. He told her that the whole story about the cold tea was a complete lie.
Continuing to investigate the family situation, the social worker learned a few more things that just shocked her. Both parents were unemployed and stayed home all day with the kids. The family was basically surviving on government assistance they got each month. And Auntie, a 12-year-old, didn't just not have his own room. He didn't even have his own bed. He slept on the couch in the living room, and on top of that, he said his father regularly punched holes in the walls during his fits of rage. This wasn't just a dysfunctional family anymore. This was a powder keg. And the social worker saw these patched up areas on the walls with her own eyes. So, 12-year-old Auntie wasn't lying, and backed into a corner. Both parents confirmed that yes, Jared Sr. had done this before. They didn't even try to deny it. There were probably too many holes. Auntie also said his father would smash phones. Kimberly tried to deny this. But Jared Sr., probably tired of lying about everything, just confirmed that yes, it happened. Their stories were already falling apart. But that's not all. The social worker found out something else shocking. Neither ART, who was 10 years old at the time, nor Jared Jr., who was 9 years old, had ever been enrolled in school, not just skipping, not homeschooled. They just did not exist. To the education system, ghost children at ages 9 and 10. During the next home visit on November 1st, the social worker took a logical step. She asked both parents to sign release forms, a standard piece of paper that would allow her to access the children's medical records and finally talk to their doctors. And this is where the real hysteria began. Kimberly immediately got upset and asked why they were needed, throwing out the phrase, "This is how things get twisted. I'm sorry, what exactly gets twisted? These are medical facts. How can they be twisted? This is the reaction of someone who knows for a fact that there is something in those records that no one should ever see. She started insisting that, she was a good mother. She took the kids to the ER when they got sick. Not to scheduled checkups, but to the emergency room. And then she just threw down the release forms and started screaming at the social worker. And the cherry on top, she asked if she should hire a lawyer. There it is. Innocent people ask, how can I help clear this up? Guilty people scream and ask for a lawyer. And just so you understand, neither she nor Jared Sr. ever agreed to let the agency see their children's medical records. Ever. This was their hard line, the wall they hid their secrets behind. It was getting harder and harder for the social worker to work with this family. She was hitting a wall of lies and aggression. At one point, there was even an emergency meeting at the agency. They understood the situation was getting out of control. And they insisted that Kimberly and Jared Sr. agree to a family plan. And when that first social worker was asked how serious she thought the situation was, she rated it a 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10. That's not there are some difficulties. That's the house is on fire. That's these kids needed to be removed yesterday. The plan they developed was simple. Try again to sign those damn medical forms. Make sure the 2 school-age ghost children were finally enrolled in school. Check with the agencies in Schuylkill County and New Jersey about past interactions with the family.
But along with this, they decided to replace the social worker. Instead of listening to the alarm that was screaming 9 out of 10, they decided the problem was the alarm itself. They seriously thought that assigning a male social worker from a rural area, just like Kimberly and Jared Sr., might help get better cooperation. They decided to solve the problem with a good old boy approach, and that decision was fatal. Kirsten Johnson, who was a high-ranking official at the agency, later testified under oath that the new social worker had a completely different view of the family situation than the first worker. In other words, it seemed this new social worker didn't share the same level of concern at all. He was sent to calm the situation, and he calmed it. And the scariest part, there was zero discussion between the old and new workers or their supervisors about why their views were so drastically different. Nobody sat down and asked, "Hold on, colleague. Why do you see a 9 out of 10 and you see a 2 out of 10? Let's figure this out." No, it was just an organizational failure, negligence at a management level. Even though the first social worker, the one who saw the truth, was no longer on the case, she did her duty honestly. She visited the home again with the new social worker during the handoff. She also wrote a full, detailed report summarizing everything. So the new worker couldn't say he didn't know something, he knew everything. But despite knowing about all the problems, the punched-in walls, the aggression, the lies, the ghost children, this new social worker and his supervisor just didn't follow up on enrolling the children in school. They just forgot about it. A 9 and 10-year-old not in school. Well, things happen. They also, of course, failed to get the parents to sign the medical forms, and that meant the agency remained blind. It had no way to verify if the children were actually getting the help they so desperately needed. They just kept visiting the kids at home, checking the boxes. They saw the kids during these visits, checked in with BT at her school. Yep, they're alive. Our work here is done. During one of the visits, the supervisor, not the social worker, but his boss, again asked Kimberly to sign the medical forms. She, of course, refused. She had already sensed the weakness of this new team, but she offered an alternative. She said they could look at the folders she herself had created with her children's medical records. Here, look at my homework. I graded it myself. I got an A+. And what do you think? Instead of sending an official request and getting those records directly from the doctors, the agency accepted these folders. They agreed to a filtered, prepared, possibly falsified version of reality. This wasn't an inspection anymore. It was a farce. And here, the climax. Neither the supervisor nor the new social worker ever went up to the third floor of the house. The supervisor later admitted she never went past the first floor, and the social worker, he didn't even know the house had a third floor. How can you inspect a house and not inspect the house? He thought the ceiling of the first floor was the roof. The secret was right there, over their heads, just one flight of stairs away, but they just didn't care enough. And since they never got access to the real medical records and couldn't verify a single word the parents said, the agency decided to close the case. December 20th, 2013, they couldn't do their job. So they decided the job was done. The logic is deadly. They also, by the way, never contacted the school district to find out if the two children who weren't in school had ever been enrolled. They just asked the family to do it, but never checked the children. Were just abandoned. Exactly 1 month passed. On January 21st, 2014, a call came from Hershey Medical Center about ART. She had been hospitalized a few days earlier, on January 17th, and when she arrived, she looked absolutely filthy. She was taken to the hospital by ambulance. The family, of course, didn't have a car, and there were other kids at home. But even though they could have easily taken a bus, they never once came to visit her in the hospital. Their severely ill daughter was in the hospital alone, and they just didn't care. ART couldn't speak and needed significant, constant medical care. She was hospitalized for a rapid heartbeat and fever. But the hospital staff was worried about more than just that. The nurses who had worked with her before. Remember that story? They flat out refused to be assigned to her, stating that the Tutko family was just too difficult to work with. Even professionals were giving up. They knew this family was poison. The hospital didn't even notify the family about this case and was planning for a different nursing service to take over her home care. But when the hospital was preparing to send ART home, they, of course, called Kimberly and Jared Sr., and the old game started all over again. First, they said they didn't have the necessary medications to care for their daughter. The hospital checked. A lie. They confirmed the meds were there, so the parents came up with a new one. She can't come home if she needs oxygen. They claimed some doctor from St. Christopher's Hospital once said it was forbidden. The hospital contacted that doctor. And again, a lie. The doctor confirmed ART could safely return home with oxygen, and only when all their excuses, their entire wall of lies, was torn down. When they were cornered by the facts, did they agree to her discharge? She was sent back into that hell.
And meanwhile, between 2013 and 2014, Jared Sr. was locking Jared Jr. in the front bedroom on the third floor of their house. On that same third floor, the social worker didn't even know existed, his official excuse. On July 27th, as Jared Sr. claimed, was the last time he saw Jared Jr. alive in that same bedroom, and he didn't see his son again until July 29th. Jared Sr. didn't tell his wife what happened. His first thought wasn't, "Oh my God, Kimberly." It wasn't 911. His first thought was concealment. He continued to hide it from her. He put on a horrific theater, pretending to check on his son from time to time. "Yeah, honey, just checked on Jared." It was only at 10:35 p.m. that Kimberly called the Harrisburg police. When they arrived, Kimberly told them the version of the story Jared Sr. had fed her. She said he was primarily responsible for their son's care. And that she had not gone up to Jared Jr.'s room in years. For years, her son was living one floor above her, and she hadn't seen him in years. Her excuse. She explained she was mainly responsible for caring for their other very sick daughter, ART, and she didn't go near Jared Jr. because she was afraid of bringing germs to her daughter. This is such an absurd, cynical lie. But you're afraid of germs. You're not afraid of germs. You just abandoned your child. And this lie quickly fell apart. Kimberly later did admit that she had seen her son a day or two before his death. She knew. She talked to a journalist and explained that when she asked her husband why he never told her about their son's death, he admitted he was too scared to talk. Because of the other kids in the house, scared, not devastated, not heartbroken, scared. Like he broke a favorite vase. When police entered the bedroom on the third floor, that same phantom room, they saw the door was closed. There was no furniture except for one TV. On September 29th, 2014, Kimberly was also arrested.
Good afternoon, I'm Heather Warner.
And I'm Evan Forrester. A Harrisburg mother is charged.
Fox 43's Katie Kairos joins us now live at the Dauphin County Courthouse, where the district attorney just held a press conference.
Yes, both parents of Jared Tutko Jr. are now charged with criminal. The district attorney says they showed extreme indifference to the value of 9-year-old Jared was found dead at his home on Green Street in Harrisburg on August 1st. His mother, Kimberly Tutko, wasn't charged until today. The light was broken and the doorknob was turned out so that he could never escape from the room. They say she lied that she hadn't been up to her son's room in years, but she later admitted she had seen him days before he died. The investigation shows that Dauphin County Children and Youth Services had repeated warnings about what was happening to Jared. Records show the boy's brother told a caseworker what was happening to Jared last October. I'll have more on what he said and the other warnings that caseworkers received that came to nothing at 5 o'clock.
At that time, Jared Jr.'s height was 42 inches. That's about 106 centimeters. And his weight, are you ready for this? Only 16.9 pounds. That's 7.6 kilograms. A 9-year-old child, 106 centimeters tall, weighing 7.6 kilograms. This is the weight of an average 8-month-old baby. She was immediately taken to Penn State Hershey Medical Center. And what Dr. Lori S. Fraser, who led the child protection team at Hershey, said, "It's just mind-boggling. How did this happen?" And investigating Jared Jr.'s death, a grand jury began to study, or rather dig, into CYS, the Dauphin County Children and Youth Services. They found that the agency itself had colossal difficulties with organization and case management. It was bureaucratic chaos, ironically, in March 2014, just a few months before Jared Jr.'s death, when that social worker didn't find the third floor. CYS had just begun to change its way of working. Before this change, the agency was divided into 3 main parts: intake, in-home protective services, and permanency. Each part had its own director. And it seems they didn't communicate much when someone reported neglect, as the school did constantly. The intake department got the case first. This department had even smaller subdivisions. CPS and General Protective Services, depending on the severity of the situation, the case was passed to CPS or GPS for investigation. And here, the key problem. CYS completed the investigation, maybe found problems. The case was transferred to the in-home care department, and these specialists would then work with the family, create a plan, set goals, and check every 6 months how things were going. And based on this, they would decide whether to close the case, which they did in December 2013.
On the other hand, if the children were removed from the home, the case was transferred to the permanency and adoption department and their main goal, and this just sounds wild in the context of this case, was to help reunify families. They would try until the very end to return the children back to Kimberly and Jared Sr. In court, of course, both Jared Sr. and Kimberly. What would you think? Pleaded not guilty, of course not. This happened at a preliminary hearing on December 10th, 2014. During the trial, one of the key pieces of evidence, one of the most powerful emotional triggers, was that same photo of the dirty stuffed rabbit found in the prison room, Erica Martelli, that same first social worker who screamed 9 out of 10. Knowing that it was probably the only source of any comfort Jared Jr. ever had, his only friend in the dark. During the hearings, Judge John Cherry was especially harsh with Kimberly, the mother who was afraid of germs. He told her directly, "We don't even keep animals like this." And he was right. He also told her he could not, in any way, understand how she, a mother, allowed this. And what did Kimberly say? She claimed she was hurt and scared. She said she wished more than anything for her son to come back. But why? So she could apologize for not protecting him. What a manipulative, disgusting phrasing. She didn't fail to protect. She participated. Her lawyer, of course, tried to play a different game, an attempt to shift all the blame onto Jared Sr. And what about Jared Sr. himself? He also tried to explain his actions in court. He cried, "I'm not a monster. I love my child, and I tried my best." Prosecutors, of course, demanded the highest possible punishment. But as often happens, the judge gave the couple slightly less time in exchange for their guilty plea. They didn't want to risk a jury trial. So on October 26, 2015, both parents, both Kimberly and Jared Sr., pleaded guilty to third-degree murder. On sentencing day, Jared Sr. spoke first. Judge John Cherry sentenced him to 21 to 42 years in prison. A few minutes later, Kimberly, the beat, entered the same courtroom, and the judge sentenced her to 20 to 40 years in prison, almost identical terms. And the judge emphasized this, telling them they were both equally guilty. The end. Lead prosecutor Sean McCormick stated the sentences were fair. He said that day was about finding justice for Jared Jr. and his sister, ART, and they achieved it the only way the system could, by locking up the 2 people responsible for this for most of their lives. But Coroner Hetrick stated directly that he gave her the names of 2 agencies that help families in similar situations for free. And according to him, she never contacted him. She just didn't care. She was overwhelmed not with grief, but with her arrest. And since no one responded, the coroner had to move forward. Jared's final resting place was a so-called Potter's Field, a cemetery owned by the county. However, his Find a Grave page states he was buried at East Harrisburg Cemetery. It's possible his ashes were buried in one place, and his memorial stands in another. His glossy black headstone is shaped like a heart and simply says, "In memory of Jared N. Tutko Jr., October 5th, 2004, August 1st, 2014, and it also has a picture of a rabbit, the same one found in the room, the one that served as his only source of comfort. On August 1st, 2019, the 5th anniversary of Jared Jr.'s death, Prosecutor McCormick recalled the day he was called to the crime scene. He said he was struck not only by the horrifying condition of that room, he was struck by how clearly, how mercilessly this case exposed the deep. According to the prosecutor, Jared Jr.'s death was not only the result of his monster parents' actions, it was also a direct result of years of systematic failures by the child welfare and protection system. The family was known to services in different counties, even across state lines. But nothing changed.
That's why the grand jury was brought in, to investigate what the hell went wrong. Their work led to a 122-page report, detailing not only what happened to Jared, but why it was allowed to happen. The report showed the weaknesses of the very institutions that were supposed to protect children like him, and the grand jury offered significant recommendations. They pointed out 4 main problems. First, the training for social workers was simply inadequate. They weren't taught how to recognize a manipulator or how to inspect a house that might have a 3rd floor. Second, there was a substantial, fatal lack of communication between Dauphin County CYS and other groups. They didn't communicate with schools or doctors or even CYS in another state. Third, the deadline for completing investigations was only 60 calendar days. This was considered completely unrealistic and dangerous. I mean, a lot of harm can happen in 60 days. For a child in that situation, 60 days is a lifetime. And finally, the insane turnover rate. The number of workers quitting and the huge caseload on those who stayed made it almost impossible to keep up with everything. Prosecutor McCormick said these problems constantly arise not only in Dauphin County but across the entire state. And as we know, these problems exist all over the country. That's why, in the weeks leading up to August 1st, 2019, he said they would start reviewing these recommendations again, checking what had changed and what still needed to be done. Because for Prosecutor McCormick, and for us, for 5 years, the main thing wasn't just remembering what happened to Jared Jr., it was about making sure no other child lived and died the same way he did.